Okay, it's Wednesday, so I got two things I want to talk about in the gaming news world this week. The first thing, of course, is the big bad headline of the week. It's not exactly great news, but it is that Microsoft has cut 9,100 jobs, leading to not only a ton of people losing their livelihood, but also studios being closed and games being canceled. This is still developing as of the time of me recording this. Like, the sky is still falling from this. We're still hearing about what exactly, like, who's left, what's happening, but the top thing is this comes off the heels of Xbox doing multiple rounds of layoffs over the last few years. Not to mention also getting rid of studios like Tango Gameworks in the past. But this is much bigger. And at this point, usually this news happens and it's like, oh, that sucks, man. Game industry is crazy. It always sucks. Like, sucks everybody lost their jobs. But like, it's really at this point become this like very systemic, very bad thing for the state of the industry as a whole. I want to talk about that in a second, but basically, like the cliff notes of this news, VGC reports Microsoft has said that as much as 4%, or roughly 9,100 of the company's total employees across all departments, including gaming, are affected by Wednesday's layoffs. Some of this comes from King, the makers of Candy Crush, which is still something that is a cash cow, but I guess apparently not enough, but also across other studios. Presumably more at Activision Blizzard from what we know. Also, Rare seems to be like a major cut, with VGC reporting that Everwild has just been completely canceled. Along with that, one of the heads at Rare, one of the people behind Sea of Thieves, yes, but also like Banjo-Kazooie, has left left Rare after decades now. Along with that, according to Bloomberg, the people at ZeniMax Online who made the Elder Scrolls Online, apparently they were working on a new MMORPG that has been canceled and people have been laid off. Not to mention the fact that they have shut down the studio that they set up called The Initiative. The Initiative was this big new AAA studio that Xbox built to make a new Perfect Dark game. That studio is now shut down and Perfect Dark is canceled. Kotaku also reports that cuts are underway at State of Decay 3 studio Undead Labs also. So just real not good all across the board. And I think ultimately this comes down to just major frustration. And I think because people are quick to make this like console war shit and be like, ho ho, Xbox, but you say this about Xbox and not about PlayStation. I don't think any of that shit matters. I think what matters now is like, as a player of games, as somebody who looks at games and is excited for new games to come out and like, I follow the announcements and stuff. This is just frustration from a systemic level. And it's something that it just feels like Xbox has continuously fumbled, and that is having all the money in the world, having the resources, acquiring all these studios, and then just kind of fumbling that opportunity. Look, when Xbox started gobbling everything up, which kind of crescendoed with Activision Blizzard, obviously plenty of skepticism about one company forming a monopoly and owning a bunch of things, right? But like, the positive side is like, oh, well, maybe because they have infinite money, they can enable some of these studios to really make some incredible shit. And it really seems like we haven't seen a lot of that. You know, on the one hand, they've been able to get out things like Diablo 4, and they've kept the Call of Duty machine churning. And yes, some cool games for Xbox Game Pass and stuff like that, some middle of the road games, have received funding. They're also just kind of, I don't like, it just feels like such, I don't want to go as far as to say this yet, but do you remember when Embracer Group bought up so much IP? They bought up all different types of gaming studios, property, old franchises, with the hopes of bringing them all back, and then they just fucking collapsed all of it. People got laid off, projects were canceled. It just felt like such like a reckless, wasteful squandering of IP and things that people love. Xbox is starting to get to that territory. If you couldn't get out something like Perfect Dark out the door, and you're fumbling creative talent, people at Rare, not to mention the fact that you had like one of the biggest like franchises in the world with Halo, and you've struggled with that, you know, not to mention a million other things. Like now you also own the people who make Fallout and Elder Scrolls, and you haven't like been able to, you know, inject anything really into that. It's just not good. It just feels extremely frustrating because now it's like they got all these things, right? They grabbed all these things, but now they're kind of languishing. And a lot of the people that worked hard on these things, on these games for so many years, are seemingly left in the dust. So that's my frustration with the whole thing. And when this always happens, people always ask, well, like, okay, but like, yeah, everybody's getting laid off and like all these things are happening, but what about leadership? And I honestly think after such a big shift like this, mark my words, something is coming out about leadership sooner rather than later. Leadership change-ups, shake-ups at the top or near the top. You know, all the people like the Phil Spencers, the Matt Booties, the Sarah Bonds, stuff like that. There has to be a remix. There has to be a shake-up at some point now, because not only just because of like the failures here, but also like Microsoft has been and Xbox has been doing such a pivot that I feel like there just has to be change. There has to be accountability. And I do think that that is happening. Like, I think that is also the aftermath of this big announcement. Mark my words, call it a gut feeling. I don't necessarily know like what's going to happen. And I don't know whether or not it's going to be like all of a sudden there's leadership that people like, but I do think changes are going to happen. And frankly, I think at this point they should. Also, I think me as someone who buys and plays games, I shouldn't have to think or care about that stuff or their strategy or their market situations that much anyway. And I love the inside baseball, but enough is enough. And frustration is the word I keep bringing. Also the fact that like there are probably things now that have been canceled from this layoffs or from when like, you know, Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks and stuff like that. This whole culmination, there's probably a bunch of other things canceled that we don't even know about. With the game industry being so secretive and with so many projects worked on for years and years and years and not revealed, games are shit canned all the time. So there's probably a bunch of stuff that could have had potential that also hasn't seen the light of day. And I think that's going to continue to happen. And I think that sucks. That's right. You're getting negative, Jake, today, because like this stuff is just so not good. Like I said at the start, like it feels not good for the industry as a whole, because yes, projects aren't seeing the light of day. Things that people love, franchises that people love are languishing, not being taken advantage of, not, you know, blossoming. Also, brain drain, of course. People are getting fired, laid off, tossed to the side. Intelligent people who have experience working games that, at this point, with how tough the job market can be, may stop making games. And then you may lose a good creative mind that worked on some of your favorite games. They moved on to something else, something more lucrative. Phil Spencer, like there was a statement to like employees, like there's an official statement, there's all this, it's all corporate speak. To me, it's not even worth reading out loud because it's just that corporate speak gobbledygook, but ultimately an extremely frustrating situation that I don't think we're going to hear the end of in terms of leadership shakeups, but also the fact that this is still developing. We're still getting wind right now as of recording what studios are shutting down, what studios are experiencing layoffs, what games are being shut down. But as of right now, that's what we know. So if you want to read up on that stuff, everything I talk about, it's all linked in the description down below, all the sources and stuff. All right, if you're new here, this is two things. Every Wednesday, mostly every Wednesday, I do a news video where I just do a deep dive into two topics. Not like the Friday show on Game Ranks where I talk about all the news. Here, I just kind of zero into a couple of things. The other bit of news I wanted to talk about this week is a bit lighter fare. It's just some silly bullshit that Hideo Kojima has said. So Hideo Kojima and crew and Kojima Productions and the great Yoji Shinkawa and all those people have essentially been taking Death Stranding 2 on a tour. Kind of like a press tour, concert tour, and there's been some interesting things to come out of it. Also, side note, if you didn't see the Game Ranks before you buy, or my Instagram post or my Twitter post or whatever, I really like Death Stranding 2. I think I like it more than the first. I'm biased because I'm a Kojima fan, but I had my issues with the first one, and I think Death Stranding 2 kind of fixes a lot of that. I'll do a dedicated video on that soon, but that aside, I'm trying to like completely 100% it first, but that aside, yeah, Hideo Kojima in an interview talked about his next game a little bit. VGC reports Hideo Kojima wants to develop a game in space. So at this Sydney Film Festival, Kojima said that he doesn't merely want to go into space as part of the burgeoning space tourism industry, but instead wants to spend extended time in orbit. The quote is, I want to train properly, learn how to do the docking, go to the International Space Station, and stay there for a few months. I'm not a scientist, but I could probably make games in space. I want to be the first. There are a lot of astronauts over 60, so I guess it's possible. Then it gets even crazier with what he said. He started talking about Tom Cruise and putting himself in dangerous situations like how Tom Cruise does when he films the stunts and stuff to make him feel alive. He says, and I quote, "It's the Tom Cruise disease. Tom Cruise finds out his worth when living with his life on the line." That's just a good quote. The Tom Cruise disease is something that I think should be patented. Good job. But like really, silly shit aside, Hideo Kojima developing a game in space, why not? Crazier things have happened. I honestly think like following Hideo Kojima's trajectory since like 1998, 1999 when I first like became obsessed with Metal Gear Solid, never expected this like normal weird creative nerd to ascend to these heights, doing talks at Sydney film festivals, Venice film festivals, meeting all these celebrities, doing all this crazy stuff with his games, coming up with podcasts, all this stuff, right? So at this point, I feel like anything can happen. So why not? Why not put him in space? I feel like he's done some stunts and stuff in the past, and I could see him doing some more crazy stunts that honestly people would kind of like roll their eyes at, like PR stunts and stuff like that. But why not? To me, what I've always gotten across from him is that he does a lot of it because clearly he probably loves the fame, he loves the celebrities and stuff like that. But he's also driven to harness that to, push gaming forward. He had a really good interview recently with GQ that I highly recommend reading. I'll link that in the description down below. And that's really what I got from his direction here, like his drive. So going to space, getting more eyeballs, a guy made a game in space, do it. Why not? To bring it all back around, Hideo Kojima is talking about maybe going to space while Xbox is like struggling with great things like Rare getting a game out. Like, it's frustrating. Anyway, I was trying to stay positive with the story. Those are the two things I wanted to talk about this week, but got a bonus thing. I usually have a bonus thing I want to talk about. Let's talk about 007 James Bond. One of my favorite things. Stick with me though. It's movie news, but I can relate it back to gaming. So it was announced that Amazon MGM, who I was very skeptical of like taking over the Bond franchise, has announced the director they're working with for the next James Bond 007 movie. It is Denis Villeneuve, of course, behind Dune 1 and 2, which are fantastic films. He's also working on Dune Messiah, which is probably going to be really weird. Good luck with that. But he's also behind so many things. The Blade Runner sequel, but also one of my favorite and most unsettling movies ever, Prisoners, just a beautiful, insane, pit of your stomach feeling movie. Enemy, he's done a lot over the years. He has a very strong creative vision. I like when he co-writes his stuff. He works with really good cinematographers. So like this is great. This is a huge announcement. This is like a director at the top of his game being attached to helm the next Bond movie, which will kind of steer the direction of the Bond franchise because it introduces a new James Bond. Denis is on record being a Bond fan since he was a kid, watching the old goofy ones, which is good, like, Dr. No and like, Connery, Roger Moore stuff. And I think that's good. I think that awareness is good because initially with this announcement, I was a little bummed just because I think the Craig era Bond movies got pretty serious. They're not the most serious things in the world, but that is the most serious real Bond we've had. And with Denis Villeneuve, I see it just going even more in that direction. Where, on the one hand, I kind of wanted them to embrace the legacy of the old movies and do more wacky, dumb, more lighthearted stuff. But from the buzz and everything, it seems like they're going to continue in a serious route, but also sticking closer to Fleming's novels, which I think there's plenty of opportunity there to provide something gritty and real and interesting. But with, Villeneuve also mentioning in his statement that he wants to honor the legacy of the Bond films, he said it's sacred territory. I'm hoping that there is some levity to these films. I think that there can be a perfect mix, and I'd like to see that. Denis also, he tends to do very serious stuff, so I don't know, but Stilgar was hilarious, specifically in Dune 2, so we'll see how that goes. So while I was initially skeptical, like after sitting on it, I think it's pretty exciting. I mean, like we have like one of the cooler directors right now, getting his hands on a franchise that a lot of people, and myself personally, love. So what's the worst that can happen? Let's give it a shot. Now, it's interesting that they are, having a director that's probably going to do something pretty real. Again, the buzz might be more towards like a more gritty, real, grounded Ian Fleming novel-inspired Bond. That's also IO Interactive's game in a lot of ways. IO Interactive's game down to like, the little scar and like a lot of stuff. It seems like they're carving out their own unique Bond identity, which was by having, number one, a young Bond, and number two, being a little bit inspired by the Fleming novels. So now here we have a new James Bond movie that very much could be inspired by the Fleming novels, but also the word out there from the trades and stuff that they are looking to cast a younger Bond. So stick with me here. The new Bond movie might be Fleming inspired with a younger Bond. the game is Fleming inspired with a younger Bond. So I'm hoping that there's room for both, and they can also both feel like they have their own unique identities. Because when I first saw the trailer for the game, I was like, this is so unique, this is so special, this is going to be its own Bond thing. I'm really curious to see now how this lands up against a new Bond movie. Just some food for thought. I don't know. Either way, exciting times for Bond fans. I love to see it. I'm still slowly replaying Everything or Nothing. It's one of the best games ever made. Maybe I'll make a video on that at some point. Anyway, I've talked enough. So thank you for listening to me this week. Let me know what you think about everything. The frustrations with Xbox, the bullshit going on there, the layoffs. Was there a game canceled that you're bummed about? Is there a team you're worried about? Do they make your favorite games? Let's talk. Let's talk about that, the bigger ramifications for the industry, that stuff I mentioned. And let me know what you think about Hideo Kojima making games in space on a lighter note. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Bond. Anything at all, really. Hit me up. Let me know in those comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you to all of you who showed up for my 10-year Before You Buy anniversary video. I really appreciate the kind words. I couldn't reply to every comment, but thank you guys for being nice to me. I feel like it's rare for a content creator to have their audience be nice to them, but I am grateful for you guys, so thank you. But I've yapped enough. If you have a holiday weekend, I hope you have a great one. Either way, I'm Jake Baldino. See you guys next time. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.